Dangerous pastime?
I know.
Where's your other hand? Between two pillows. Those aren't pillows.
Good evening, nerds. Welcome to Nerd Night Tokyo 41.9.2 Hive Minds, our online show for November 2020. I hope no one minded that I got a little political in tonight's pre-show trailer, but that little election thing happening stateside really has been sucking up the air in the room recently. So yeah, hypoxia is my excuse. Anyway, in case you're new here, Nerd Night Tokyo is one of many Nerd Nights happening across the globe every month. Nerd Night is an event that features bite-sized talks by experts in a casual setting, usually accompanied by alcoholic beverages. But while we're online, you'll have to bartend your own selves, at least until Bruce, Ian, and Coco invented Drinks Cannon. It's coming though, right, guys? The Drinks Cannon? We hold an event every month, and the next one is scheduled for December 4th, so make sure you mark your calendars. The show will feature our usual slate of 3 smart speakers. Check for updates on our Facebook page, Twitter, or our website, tokyo.nerdnight.com. Night is spelled N-I-T-E, I guess because somebody thought that was cute. Coming right now to an internet near you, it's the Nerd Night Tokyo branded beakers. They'll thrill you, they'll chill you, they'll chill your drinks. They'll fight all comers in a no-holds-barred drink-holding match. You've paid for your whole seat, but you'll only need the edge! I said no holds barred, and true to my word, I am currently holding mine. It's taking all of my strength to stop it from smashing this cold drink right in my face hole! These bad boys are made from lab-grade glass. They can hold hot drinks, cold drinks, protein shakes, baby formula. The only limit is your imagination. There are only a few left, and once they're gone for good. At least until Nerd Night is back in meat space again. So don't hesitate. Get your beaker today by heading over to the support page at ytg.jp. What is YTG? Well, Nerd Night Tokyo is a production of and a fundraiser for the Yokohama Theater Group, or YTG, a non-profit theater company dedicated to creating challenging, original works of theater as well as theater training and education. If you didn't buy a ticket tonight and have since decided you want to support us, or if you want to buy one of these rock'em sock'em beakers, head over to ytg.jp and click the support button. And now we come to our agenda for tonight. Up first, Karamoon is going to introduce us to a system that goes beyond the web to capture knowledge and create collective intelligence to tackle the world's biggest problems. And hey, it's not Skynet. Our second speaker, Johanna Rotko, is this year's BioArt Society Tokyo resident. She's going to explore fermented colors and living images. What does that all mean? Stick around to find out. Kyogo Kawaguchi is our third speaker, and he will use many body physics to help us understand the development and maintenance of the body. You don't know what that means? I also don't know what that means, but you know what? I can't wait to find out. I'm super excited. All the talks tonight will be followed by a live Q&A, so when you have a question, post it in the YouTube chat, and our team, featuring my co-boss Amanda, Don Warren, human, unemployed bartender Ian, and whatever other members of the team are floating around, will pass your questions along to me to ask our speakers. Okay, just a point of clarification, Ian is actually employed, just not currently as our Nerd Night bartender, since we have no bar to tend, except, of course, in your imagination. After each of the first 2 talks, there will be a 7-minute intermission for you to go to the little nerd's room or refill your drink, or why not both? And now, without further preamble, allow me to introduce our first speaker. The key thing about all the world's big problems is they must be dealt with collectively. If we don't get collectively smarter, we're doomed, said Doug Engelbart. We're facing numerous deadly global threats, and we live in the age of stupid. Not a great combination, I'm sure you'll agree. Combating these threats requires deep insight into things we can't even see, let alone control. No single person is able to solve even the smallest part of the problems we face. Yet, when we work together, the results are comically tragic. Remember the atomic bomb? And New Coke? And Season 8 of Game of Thrones? We desperately need a system that allows us to work collectively on very tough problems. Problems that are poorly defined and have many slippery, overlapping, intermingled, and intertwingled parts. Clearly, the web we have now is just not up to the job. Yet! All is not lost. We still have a chance, albeit a very slim one. In this talk by Karamoon, you'll discover Deep Hypertext, a revolutionary system that captures knowledge without constraining it. Karamoon is a hacker based in Tokyo. He saw Ted Nelson give a talk on Deep Hypertext in 2006, and he hasn't been the same since. With no further yakety-yak, here is Karamoon. Karamoon, take it away.
So I'm going to tell you the greatest story ever told, the story of Deep Hypertext, and how you understand this story and how you take part in where the story's going. That could really have quite a big impact on humanity and the future of our planet. We are facing desperate challenges, and those challenges are coming at a faster and faster rate. And we're not keeping up as individuals, as groups, as nations, and as humanity. One of the things we're really struggling with is that although we're in desperate need of tools to help us understand the challenges and meet those challenges, we've created tools and tool systems that hinder us and limit us. We've got ourselves locked in to tools that don't really work very well. I'm sure you can think of many, many challenges just this year that we've seen, struggling to deal with corruption and leaders who are not on the right side of sanity, dealing with a global pandemic, dealing with the state of perpetual war. We have peak oil. We've probably reached peak oil in many parts of the world, and globally, we're desperately running out of oil. And we've come up with all these tool systems and tools and ways of doing things, particularly from industrialization onwards, that are really limiting us and limiting what we think about and how we do things. And we've got stuck in these habits, got stuck in ways of doing things, got stuck with certain models of how the world works, models which are very far from reality. And we're getting a dose of reality this year. And even in your daily life, I'm sure you have a lot of frustration with tech that doesn't do what you know it should do. But there's something more subtle, which is the tech kind of guides you in certain directions that may not be useful. Marshall McLuhan is very well known for his quote, "The medium is the message." But he said a couple of far more perceptive things. One of the things he said is that we shape our tools, and in time they shape us. And that's what I'm really going to be talking about over the next 15, 20 minutes, is how we've been shaped by particularly computing tools, and how we're going in a direction which is not useful, and you could strongly argue is not healthy either. So if you think about the tools you use every day to live, to do your work, these tools augment us as humans, so they extend our capabilities. Get into vehicles so you can travel around at speed. We've got lots of ways of keeping and retrieving information, sharing information, publishing information, lots of communication tools. And after a while, we think of these tools as being fact. That's quite a weird concept, really, a tool being a fact. We think it kind of reflects a fact or facts about reality and about the universe. But of course, really, tools are embodiments of beliefs and habits and assumptions. Often there are very strong commercial interests there. So I'm going to tell you the story of deep hypertext. It's unlikely you've heard of deep hypertext. And if you have, it would just be in a computer history book or maybe mentioned in a magazine article. And we use hypertext, a very shallow, superficial hypertext, most of us many, many, many times a day, which is the web. The web was a set of technologies invented really by Tim Berners-Lee, working at CERN. And he had built a hypertext system at CERN. I think it was called maybe Inquire. And he kind of watered it down and turned it into the web. And some of the core technologies are the URL, the common form that we use in daily life is the web address, HTML, which is the language that describes material on the web and links it together in a superficial way, and HTTP, which is the protocol for transferring information on the web. And the web runs on top of the internet, the global network of networks. And for most people, if you ever did think about hypertext, that might be as far as you'd get. And in fact, if you studied computer science at university, when hypertext was mentioned, it would be in that context. And it would be taken as a given. It's just a fact. But there's a lot more to it. And I'm going to tell you about some of that and why it's so relevant. So there's been hypertext really since the 1960s, and it was invented or discovered by a couple of people independently, Ted Nelson and Doug Engelbart. Deep hypertext is not a set of tools. It's not even a tool system, really. It's a way of capturing generality, capturing overlap, capturing discussion, capturing knowledge. And it's far, far more powerful than the sort of watered down hypertext that we have. It has some key properties. When I describe them, they're going to sound like features, but they're not features, they're properties. Since the web kind of started to explode in 1994, which was when first commercial websites were allowed. So I think the first web server turned on 1992, but it was only for universities and schools and government use. 1992 to 1994, it was another tool. But there were others around at the time, obviously email, FTP, file transfer protocol, a front end to FTP called Gopher, because it lets you go for information, kind of a cool name. And before then, there was deep hypertext. So in the 60s, 70s, 80s, people were working on this thing called hypertext. And because of the nature of the web and some of the underlying technologies and the underlying choices that Tim Berners-Lee and later people have made, we're always sort of adding features and functionality to try and get it to do something useful. And I'm going to talk about deep hypertext, and it's going to sound like I'm talking about features, but I'm really not. I'm talking about the kind of core properties. These are properties that are intrinsic to deep hypertext. So a feature of the web is that HTTP, the way that web pages get transferred, doesn't maintain state. So if you want to sort of interact with a web page, you need some kind of workaround. And the workaround that we had really since mid-1990s, I guess, is cookies. And so we have HTML and cookies, HTTP, and URLs. And this gives us a semi-useful hypertext. And then we've added lots more things. So of course, script. So things like JavaScript, tricky things to make the page look like it's more interactive than it really is. So stuff like Ajax. And when you start looking at deep hypertext, you get all the functionality for free because the properties are so powerful. So the intrinsic properties of deep hypertext are things like being able to have content and be able to link it to other content in many different ways. So instead of the links that we have on the web, which is just a jump link, you click on a link and it jumps you to somewhere else. There are typed links in deep hypertext. So you can link content together in many different ways. You can have links that go in both directions. There are various like browser plugins that you can kind of muck around with to get some of this functionality, so you can see where something links to, but also where it's linked to from. And of course, you can dig around in Google looking for inbound links, not just outbound links. But it's clumsy, doesn't work very well. And with deep hypertext, you have high resolution linking. So you don't just link to a document like we do with the web, you can link into the document. Now, if you make a website, you can have links that link into a document. So for example, link to the third paragraph of a document, because you can put an anchor in that linked to document. You can't do that if you don't control that linked to document. There's no way that I can link to the fifth paragraph of a certain BBC News article, for example. With deep hypertext, we have high resolution linking, so you can link to anywhere in a document. We can have links that go in both directions. We can have links that go to another document, grab some content and bring it back. This is called transclusion. Now we actually have that in HTML for images. You can have an HTML document and have an image embedded into it. You can embed other types of content as well, but that's not really part of HTML. You're using extra functionality in the browser, and scripting is happening there. And again, clumsy, doesn't work particularly well. It's very difficult to include a web page or part of a web page in another web page. The messy ways to do it, can use something called an iframe. But with the hypertext systems in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you could include all or any part of any document in any other document. And it's transcluded, it's not copied, it's not making a copy, it's going and grabbing it just like an embedded image on the web we have now. So two people, Ted Nelson and Doug Engelbart, they both came up with the concept of deep hypertext independently, but they seem to have both been inspired by an essay, I think it was written like 1939, but not published until 1945 because World War II got in the way. There was an essay called As We May Think by Vannevar Bush, or Vannevar Bush. Different people seem to pronounce his name differently. I think he lived until the early 80s maybe, so he's not around to be able to ask him. He wrote an incredible essay, As We May Think. It's really worth reading it many, many times. He imagined what we'd call a knowledge worker, someone who is maybe a scientist or an engineer, some kind of researcher, or some kind of instructor, or an office worker, who's dealing with the manipulation and understanding of knowledge and sharing of knowledge. And Vannevar Bush wrote this incredible essay, imagining in the future a device called the Memex that would help you in exploring an information space. And Doug Engelbart read this article. It was published in the Atlantic Monthly, a US magazine. Engelbart read this and was inspired for the rest of his life by this. Ted Nelson had it read to him by his grandfather would have been as a young child, and kept coming back to it. And Ted Nelson is still alive, still working on deep hypertext. So independently, Doug Engelbart and Ted Nelson both came up with these ideas of a general way of capturing human knowledge and sharing it and manipulating it and comparing it. And it's fascinating that although they're working independently and they were actually working on very, very different problems, yet they still came to a very similar solution. Ted Nelson, who came up with the term hypertext, he was looking at how does an individual manage knowledge, manage creativity, and keep creative control instead of being restricted by their tools. Doug Engelbart, on the other hand, was really looking at how teams of people and how groups of people can work together, sharing their information and not losing bits of it. When we have a discussion as a group of people, there are lots of interesting things that get lost in time, and we need systems to capture that. Doug Engelbart was working on that kind of thing. And yet, Doug Engelbart and Ted Nelson, who later became very, very, very close friends, they came up with very, very similar things. And they realized that we need tools and systems and tool systems and workflows that capture generality and overlapping areas of knowledge and weighted areas of knowledge where we have bits of information, but we're not really sure how much we can trust it. And while we're working with it, our opinion changes of how trustworthy it is. So they came up with these tools and principles and systems and ways of thinking and ways of doing things. And a lot of it has got lost. And it's really worth digging out their research. It's huge amounts published online, fantastic books. Ted Nelson wrote many, many books. Doug Engelbart, hundreds and hundreds of papers. All his papers are available on the web. Both given a lot of talks, all available on YouTube. Ted Nelson wrote a seminal book called Computer Lib, and this edition, it's probably flipped because of my Mac camera or because of how Andrew's streaming, but it's got another book in, Dream Machines. That book, published in, I think, early 80s, inspired a lot of the Silicon Valley people and what they've gone on to do, good and bad. So with deep hypertext, so having a system that lets you capture knowledge, discussion, argument, and compare knowledge in very, very powerful general ways. And a lot of it comes from some technical design considerations. The key thing being that everything about describing the knowledge is held separately to the knowledge itself. So if you like, the markup is external to the content. We have on the web embedded markup, HTML, hypertext markup language, where it's all mangled and mixed up in the text of your web page. And after years and years and years, the World Wide Web Consortium at least realized that you should have the presentation bit in an external document. This is the CSS cascading style sheets. But still, lots of normal deep hypertext stuff is impossible or very, very difficult with our current system because all the markup is embedded. If you have the markup in a separate document that points to the content document, you can have overlaying of links, for example. You can have different types of links. The links can be held in a different document on a different server so that as documents move around, the server can update so you don't have all this struggle we have with broken links. What percentage of links on the web are broken? I mean, it's horrific to think about it. Other properties of deep hypertext are side-by-side comparison of different versions. So you can have content and see how it's been evolved, changed, and edited because the changes are all in separate files. So you have documents and then documents that describe documents, so these meta documents. So you get functionality like mashups and embedding and even things like wiki comes just as a natural property because of very careful design considerations and designing for generality instead of trying to add on features as you go along. So I hope that I've whetted your appetite a bit. I hope that you'll look into deep hypertext. There are plenty of books like Tools for Thought by Harold Reingold is a very good one. Ted Nelson's book, Gig Sparing Gifts. But if you're motivated enough, please track me down, send me a message on Twitter. I'm Karamoon, like kind of everywhere. Karamoon@gmail.com, drop me an email. I can point you in the direction of many resources for learning about a system and a way of making systems and tools and ways of making tools and tool systems that are so powerful and general that the relevance of deep hypertext to computing is basically the same relevance as computing has to everything else. And with these systems, if you look back at what we kind of threw away and what's been eclipsed by the web, these very powerful systems, we'd have a lot more chance of tackling some of the problems that we're dealing with today. So thank you ever so much for listening. Do find me online, Karamoon, and I'm going to finish it there. And now we shall take some questions, Andrew.
Okay. Oops, they can hear me. He can't hear me. There we go. Ah, okay. Great. Now everybody can hear me. I take it you can hear me there.
I can, yes.
Super. So let me just flip over to my. Yeah. Okay. Okay. First question. Don asked, what's the difference? This is pretty early on in the talk, but what's the difference between a feature and a property? I think you partly broke this down later, but just to be super clear about it.
No, I mean that's an excellent question, and the difference is quite subtle. So a feature is something that you have to add on. So our software consists of some assumptions and models of the world, and then a bunch of features like strapped onto it. And if you make very general models initially, you essentially get lots of capability of that software for free. And by for free, I mean you don't have to like add lots of stuff to get it to work. So if you think of just any software that you use, it's kind of riddled with clumsy features that get in the way and don't really work in the way that you expect, and particularly don't really work well together. If the software is made such that the way it holds data particularly is done in a very general way, so like a very general data structure, then you get a lot of capability for free. So a good way to think about it is fundamentally different, like writing on a small bit of lined paper. That's a very different experience to writing on like a massive bit of paper that was meters and meters square. There's like kind of emergent properties of like having huge paper and an unlimited supply of pens of any color you can imagine and all the different writing tools. You get far more out of it than just a pile of paper and pens. So yeah, it's a very subtle distinction. But when you add features, you add more and more complexity, more and more stuff goes wrong. It's harder and harder to get stuff to work together. When you have like innate properties of your data structures and of your fundamental design, then you get a lot of capability without things getting messy and complex. But yeah, it's an excellent question, and it's literally worth devoting years of your life to exploring.
Okay, next question from the other Andrew, also known as Bruce. Deep hypertext systems like Xanadu tend to be very centralized, but our world is naturally decentralized. Where do you see these ideas being applicable, and at what layer?
Yes, I think we think of like, so Xanadu is very centralized because Ted Nelson wanted to control everything. Xanadu, however, is a system that you would be able to use locally as well. Like, I mean, nowadays we talk about intranet level or using internally, a lot like when you talk about wiki, everyone thinks of Wikipedia, but actually there are tens of thousands of wikis all over the world that are used internally in companies, in universities that have internal private wikis that maybe are using the same underlying technology as Wikipedia, which runs on MediaWiki, I believe, but or enterprise level ones like the Atlassian products. So Xanadu specifically, which is Ted Nelson's system, that doesn't have to be very centralized. The way Ted Nelson answers this when he's kind of challenged on it is, it's up to you whether you're in the game or not. So even though Ted Nelson always talks about an individual using a hypertext system, if you have it at, let's say, organizational level, then there's no real kind of problem. The centralization doesn't like give you a weak link or anything. It's not like a single point of failure, because technologically, particularly now with cheap computing and massive computing, like I said, we can have the markup documents even on external servers. We can have the links on a link server, so things update without breaking as stuff gets moved around. So the centralization bit, it's one of those things that it looks like it's there, but it really isn't. It's not an intrinsic design property of Xanadu. It's just how Ted Nelson was working on a practical level.
I see. We'll see if Bruce has a follow-up question for that in a second. But while we're waiting for that, Rod wants to know. This seems quite related to me. The big drawback of early hypertext systems that supported bidirectional linking was the need for centralized content management. So, is there a web workaround for that?
So yeah,
it's really similar. I think it's a slightly different tack.
So there was. I mean, I about like in early 2000s, people were really interested in bidirectional linking. So there were browser plugins. There were things like, there were things like with WordPress, I think there was like a WordPress plugin that would essentially do some crawling and look at what was linking to you. But yeah, it's very, very, very difficult to do with the way that HTML and HTTP work. Just like HTTP is stateless, so it's connection based, but when you visit a website, you're making lots and lots of connections that end very quickly, and the only way to keep any state is using a cookie. Now actually with HTML5 we have some other options, but these are all messy, clumsy, don't really work, and they restrict us and take us in the wrong direction. They don't give us the power that we need. So I think, the current web is pretty broken, and there's no real elegant workaround at the moment.
Right. But so what do you see are there any potential solutions to this, given how much is invested in the web in its current state?
So first of all, we think, and this goes back to the beginning of my talk, where it's like we think this stuff is fact and made of stone and cannot be changed, and that our technology represents like immutable knowledge about the universe. But that's not reality at all. I mean, there were loads of competing technologies before the web. With the early web, a lot of it was influenced by Gopher, which is a graphical front end to file transfer protocol. The web runs on the internet. You can build loads of stuff that runs on the internet that's not web-based. In fact, you can also use HTTP, which is the way that web pages get transferred around, to do loads and loads of other stuff, not particularly elegantly, but with high-speed internet work, it's very usable. And in fact, there's a joke that HTTP is the universal firewall traversal protocol, because loads of our web stuff runs on HTTP. I mean, I'm using Zoom. I haven't checked the internals of Zoom, but I'm sure at least part of it goes over an HTTP. Well, obviously, if you're using in a web browser, it's all going via HTTP. So you can very easily build stuff on top of the internet and even using HTTP without having to be the web. So there are many, many things that we can do. The first step I'd say would be to kill the web browser. The web browser has been the most damaging thing for hypertext. Got this massively, massively parallel, interconnected universe of documents, and we look at it through this crappy little window, and there's no need for it at all. Kill the web browser, implement web browsing at operating system level, so it would be available for every app would just understand the web, just as your whatever word processor you have running on your computer doesn't need to understand about printers. That's done at OS level. So have hypertext, even just with the current shallow hypertext, have the hypertext rendering engine as part of the operating system, and then at least you've got every app will like natively better understand hypertext. The web browser is a disaster, really.
So you don't think we're like past the point of no return, the way like we ended up with VHS over Betamax, or TCP/IP over the numerous superior competitors that just got, it's just like there's a weight. Or another example would be like people trying to start Mastodon instances and stuff like that instead of to transfer away from Facebook. But the fact is, these awful solutions have most of the world using them.
Yeah, but your examples there are really telling, because think like Betamax lasted for ages and ages and ages and ages and ages in specific uses. Right, so because the audio quality was higher and the video quality was higher as well, right? So it's like a wider tape.
Yeah.
It was used professionally for decades after VHS had become dominant. other protocols other than TCP, like IPX, SPX, which was like the Novell stuff, that was faster and lighter than TCP/IP. So again, persisted for a long, long time in online gaming before the web dominated. So, it's the difference between hope and optimism, right? Optimism is that things are going to magically get better. Hope is like it's still worth trying to change things and improve things. And it wasn't that long ago that there was this thing called Google Video that looked like it was going to be the be-all and end-all of video on the web. And then Google bought a little company called YouTube, and then they quietly killed off Google Video a bit later on. Google tried to replace Gmail with something called Google Wave, which is very interesting because it was like a hypertext kind of
I remember Google Wave
email system. We now have, for the vast majority of young people, their web experience is not even the web. They're locked in a social media platform. Young people don't know what email is. They use Facebook Messenger, which is like a disgusting bastardized version of email that I'm forced to use all the time because of all my friends using Facebook Messenger.
Tell me about it.
So nothing is set in stone, and everything that now we just can't imagine it ever getting replaced, is going to be it's going to disappear in a few years anyway. So let's really have good quality discussion about what we need, and let's make tool systems and tools and workflows that are not limiting, frustrating, where things work together without like having to be patched together. Like, from doing AV stuff, even from tonight, that lots of stuff, because it's not like made in a general way, it's hard to get it to work together.
Yeah, indeed.
So yeah,
as anyone who was here with us at the beginning of your talk would know, when we had to restart because you were too quiet because of the way our broadcasting system interacts with me just adjusting my headphone levels. Moving on, Kip wants to know. He wants to know what can go wrong. Could deep hypertext allow a fake bank website to wrap your real bank's login page? Then after logging in, you're shown something that's got special links added. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, at the moment we have all those problems with spoofing. So some of that is about how you implement it. So at the moment, our web is very vulnerable because of the internet being vulnerable to things like man-in-the-middle attacks, where you think you're going to a website and you get redirected. But the questioner is really talking about manipulating at the hypertext level. Yes, that would be a possibility, but because it's happening at such a high level, there are very, very simple ways to deal with it, like have a hash. So just comparing hash values like we do with SSL certificates and that kind of thing. So again, it's not really a problem of deep it wouldn't really be like an additional problem of deep hypertext, but it is a fair point that just as we have at the moment, we have a big problem with fake and real documents, but in deep hypertext it's almost like everything is reuse. Everything, it's not exactly fake, but it's all reuse. But you can alert the user with, it calculates a hash and kind of shows that you're looking at a different version. So it's not like that this would be like a massive new attack vector, but neither would deep hypertext magically solve the problem of fake web servers, man-in-the-middle attacks. If you remember back in the day, IP spoofing, because IP, which is one of the core protocols of TCP/IP, that's not authenticated. DNS, which translates website names and domain names into IP addresses, that's not authenticated. There's all those problems would still exist, but they're things to be fixed at network level. This is kind of a bit above that level. Kind of a technical answer, but yeah.
No, that's a good answer. I think we're going to have to wrap the Q&A there. I'm getting the hand wave signals.
Cool.
So
Okay.
thank you, Karamoon, so much. Hopefully you'll be back with us to give a quick wave off to the audience at the end.
Sure.
And yeah, thanks so much. We're gonna throw to a break now. So I'm gonna do that. Hopefully this doesn't blow up in my face. And there we go. Hey, hey, hey. This is your friendly neighborhood Nerd Night co-boss, Andrew. This is your 2-minute warning. That's what I'm doing. It's your 2-minute warning. So if you haven't got your drink already, now's the time. Run and get it. Be back in your seat, and we're going to start again in 2 minutes. Hey, just a reminder, if you're just joining us now, that Nerd Night Tokyo functions as a fundraiser for the Yokohama Theater Group, which is a non-profit theater company. Obviously, things are shut down right now because of COVID-19, and we're not doing live Nerd Nights and selling tickets and that kind of thing. So, if you'd like to help us out, if you're enjoying yourself tonight, and you can, if you're in a position where you can, I know a lot of us who are freelancers and other types of workers have not got a lot of income right now, but if you do and you are and you can and you want to, check out ytg.jp or any of the tip links that I will have posted in the video description, and help us out. Maybe buy a virtual ticket for 1,000 yen, or whatever you like, whatever you can spare would be helpful to us. Okay. That's it. Thank you so much. Welcome back from the break. I hope everybody's got a drink and is comfortable. Before we launch into our second speaker, I just wanted to make a quick plug, shameless plug, for YTG's podcast. It's called Miss Charlotte's Finishing School for Wayward Readers, and in it, a group of us discuss a piece of Victorian literature, several chapters at a time, while competing for points. The points are assigned both arbitrarily and often capriciously by the titular Miss Charlotte Sampson, an expert on the subject of Victorian fiction. There are 9 episodes released so far, with the 10th dropping next weekend. In case you're wondering, this show has indeed got a Nerd Night connection. The first book we're reading is Wuthering Heights. This was inspired by a Nerd Night talk given by Judith Pascoe this past February. In addition, 2 of the readers on the show have previously graced the Nerd Night stage. Daniel Wishes performed some nanomaterials-related puppetry at our Science by Theater event in March of 2017. And the second former speaker is Emmy Doe, who's actually spoken twice previously at Nerd Night, both times on the power of cooperatives. She even recorded a couple episodes of the show from the top of a mountain, because that's just kind of the crazy stuff she does. In any case, give us a listen either by going to the address on the screen or by searching Wayward Readers in your podcasting app. We're also looking for new readers for Season 2, so if that sounds like it's up your alley, drop us a line on the site. And now, on with the show. Johanna Rotko is a visual artist from Finland who works with living materials, mainly different yeasts, since 2013. Her yeastograms make us think about our relationships with the microbes that are all around us and inside us. Johanna was selected for the BioArt Society's 2020 Art and Science Research Residency in Tokyo, but because of COVID-19, she is obviously not here in Japan. She plans to take up her work in spring 2021 at the BioClub Tokyo laboratory when conditions improve. So now let's dive into the world of yeasts and fungi with colorful microbial images. Take it away, Johanna.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me here to talk on the Nerd Night Tokyo. I'm very happy to be here, and greetings from Finland. I'll share my slides first, and so yeah, I was coming to Tokyo this autumn with my project, but then the Corona pandemic hit the world, so stuck in here in Finland. And so in this talk, I will tell you briefly about my ongoing project, the background and the process, and then the bigger theme of the project, and a little bit also about the ongoing research and future plans. So I got to know bioart through the various courses and workshops when I was studying in Aalto University. And in year 2012, I attended to a workshop with artists Oron Katz and Iona Zur from the Symbiotica, the Center of Excellence in Biological Arts from University of Western Australia. They are the pioneers of in biological arts, and they were part of the team who founded Biophilia, the base for biological arts unit in which was launched in Aalto University in 2012. So I did minor studies in biological arts with courses that were organized through Biophilia. I also got to know Finnish Bioart Society through the courses and workshops in Aalto. And Bioart Society has been involved with the project since the beginning. In 2017, I was a visiting researcher in Biophilia, and I worked there with the blue genetically modified yeast and red yeast called WV303. The blue yeastogram is in the first image here, and the second image is the red scientific yeast, and on the third picture, I'm working with the blue yeast. And here are a few examples of artists that are working with living materials. The Bacterial Art Collective, they are working with numerous bacteria, and one outcome of their work are those masks with bacterial painting on them. Zachary Kofer is behind the bacterigraphy work, and he says that the process is very similar to darkroom photography, only the enlarger has been replaced by the radiation source, and instead of photographic paper, this process uses Petri dish coated with a living bacterial emulsion. The algae prints are made by Russell Marks. The negative images are exposed to algae called Chlorella vulgaris. And these techniques, how these images are made, are made with bacteria and algae are very similar to yeastograms. All of these techniques are exposing raster images to living material. The Austrian artist collective called Pavilion 35 has developed the yeastogram technique. And in December 2013, they held a workshop together with the Bioart Society in Helsinki, in which I participated. And inspired by this technique, I started doing my own experiments and decided to do the artistic thesis work on yeastograms. Pavilion 35 has also published the instructions of making of yeastograms on their website, and the recipe can be found online. So the process starts with making of the raster images, and here are the steps of the process. So photo from the camera, change to black and white, then masking the main character, and then making the raster, then scaled to fit the lid of the Petri dish, and then they are printed on transparent film. The biggest image here is ready yeastogram from this same raster image. Then the growth medium is done. The recipe has evolved, containing tap water, brewer's sugar as glucose, agar-agar, and colorants, which are charcoal, turmeric, bilberries, and spirulina. Here are the different colored plates cooling down. The base is very important for their life cycle. The raster images are taped onto the lids of the Petri dishes. I use human faces, mainly old photographs from about 100 years ago. Then the yeast is measured. The boiling water is boiled in a microwave so that the extra creatures die. So the water is purified. The temperature is controlled with my hand. When the water is hand warm, yeast is mixed with the water. I use this small bottle shown in the picture for this. The yeast is spread out on the plates with the L tool. Once the yeast is evenly on the plates, the lid with the raster image taped on is placed on top. Sorry. Yeah, when it's evenly on the plate, the raster image is taped on with the lid with the raster images placed on top of the images, and they are ready then go to the under the UV lights. And here's my traveling exposure unit. And the images are under the UV lights for about 48 hours. So the ultraviolet light is an electromagnetic radiation with the wavelength from 10 to 400, from which I'm using 365 to 410 nanometers. The UV light kills or alters the yeast cells. And the yeast cells goes under these death rays, and this probably causes a lot of stress for them. Here's another setup for the exposure unit. I like to keep them covered, like in this old aquarium. So in the yeast images, various microbes grow on them. For example, other yeasts, bacteria, molds, fungi, mycelium, and other unidentified species. I photographed the diverse changes in yeast images in a regular basis during their existence. Next, I show some examples of the yeast species I have had the privilege to work with. And first is the Hansespora osmophilia. This yeast was this yeastogram was only one who survived because others were destroyed when I moved them too quickly from my studio to the storage location. Yeast is often watery when they come out from under the UV lights. The osmo yeast was yeast images were very sharp, pure white, and particularly watery images. Then the Rhodotorula graminis yeast, I got this from Swedish yeast laboratory called Craft Labs. And this picture has taken in my studio when I took them out from under the UV lights. And this close-up was taken in my studio, and here you can see the image still flat. But after only a day, it looked like this. So the yeast overgrew and destroyed the image. I scooped the yeast from the plates and tried again, but unfortunately the second exposure did not work. But the yeast was bright pink, which was a nice surprise, as I started with light orange colored yeast. And this yeast is airborne, so other plates got this pink fellow on them as well. And then next, the wild yeastograms. I got the wild baking yeast isolated near the city of Gothenburg in Sweden from Craft Labs. And here is one of the results. The wild yeast was pure orange, and it remained clean without any molds for a long time. A few weeks later, the yeastogram looked like this. When these green mold starts to grow, the image is gone quite fast. I like to think that these images make us think our relationship with microbes, those little partners that are an incomprehensive number around us and in us. We humans are housing a vast and thriving community of microorganisms. The yeast, this yeast image is a couple of days old. Yellow dots are probably bacteria and white dots are yeast called US05. These yellow dots can be Micrococcus luteus bacteria, which live in low nutrient environments, and it's estimated that it has lived unchanged about 34 to 170,000 years. On the agar plates with the yeast, battles take place between different species. Making microbes visible right now is especially important as our diverse nature is disappearing. The loss of biodiversity affects our health, and it has been said that it also plays a role in the spread of viruses. Highlighting the microbial and yeast species in photographic works emphasizes our diverse and uncontrolled environment. In this picture, there are orange bacterial spots, pink yeast, and several molds. It is impossible to make these species grow similar again. So I use UV lights to expose raster images of human faces to yeast, and during the chain of events, human disappear under the molds. So in this process, human is lost every time. As in this image, the yeast was still watery when I moved it, and the motion wiped off part of the image. And this histogram was waiting for me when I went to clean up the exhibition in September this year. The image was on display in BioArt Society's Solu space in Helsinki from 27th of August until 13th of September. This picture shows Chrysonilia neurospora mold species. And here, picture on the right-hand side was the starting situation. And then on the left-hand side, the picture was taken at the end of the exhibition. The yeastogram got framed by the neurospora mold. Okay, and then we changed the camera. Okay, so here is the same yeastogram right now. And I put some light on. And put my glass on. So the neurospora's orange dust has faded a little bit, but it's still visible. At least on the eye. And so first time I met these mold species, the neurospora and Chrysonilia molds were in the summer 2019. And I think I was really lucky to get these mold species along again for the Solu exhibition, because these molds protect the yeast images and act like preservatives for yeastograms. So, and here's another example of very old yeastogram, which is from the summer 2019. And that's so this was made in August 2019, and I don't know what happened, but the growth just stopped on this. And it would be nice to get you the smell to all of you from this very yeastogram because it does have very strong wet basement smell. So the humans are involved in these images, but they do transform into the part of the kingdom of microbes sooner or later. From my contact with the Petri dish, nothing starts to grow. Our environment is stronger. And then the so now I have been working on the yeast species that are related to malted rice. So here are some examples of the latest research with the kochi mold. And so I wasn't that sure how to handle the kochi because this is totally new species to me. And I decided that I will treat it the same way as the yeast species and just hope for the best. And in this picture, in the first, from the right-hand side is the kochi mold measured. It was really a dusty creature. And then it was mixed with the water, and in the second image or the middle image, and then the kochi water mixture were really quite lumpy, and it didn't mix well with the water. And the third image is the plate before it went under the lamps or UV lamps. So I made this week, I made 13 plates of kochi grams and then 13 yeastograms. And with the yeastograms, I used this sparkling wine yeast. And both of these were tested for the first time. And here are the results of the kochi. Wait. First kochi gram. This image wasn't that visible yesterday when I took them out, and it has formed over these over the day or about 24 hours or so. So the outcomes did not work too well, but I show you the results anyway because I think it's the very much part of this process to deal with the failures and maybe somehow learning from the mistakes. So now these images that I made are 1 day old, and then another example. And here you can see the raster for the image also, but it's, yeah, that. So the picture is formed when the living cells are sheltered by the black parts of the film. And the raster image is still taped on the lids. And so I will show you third one. So the creature that is cultivated on the Petri dish has to be alive and survive the death rays of UV and the 2 days of exposure time. But I have noticed that the yeast at least protects the agar plate, and they are not getting them moldy that fast. And then the moldgram slide. So here's another example of the moldgrams. Yeah, there's sometimes the failures can be something else, and these images are accidentally made. So here the yeast died and the mold made the picture, and I call these moldgrams. Right hand side, the picture was taken when it came out from under the UV lights, and left side picture was taken a couple of weeks later. And it lasted longer than I thought. And then next I'll show you some more of the result of this week's exposure session, which are these lingonberry plates. First, this one, it's 10 times 10 centimeters wide. The plate, the bigger plate here, so it doesn't fit the whole on the camera, but you can see the picture. So the lingonberry agar plate was the first time I tried this berry to color the agar, and it worked out quite nicely, I think. So I could use it, or I will use it again. It was really bright pink color, and then another one from the lingonberry set was this there was quite big change in the images after this, like, one day with these lingonberry agars, and the color has faded a little bit because it was like really bright pink yesterday. No, I mean in the starting situation on Tuesday. But I think it's something that I have to try again also. So the sparkling wine yeast was also something that I tried for the first time. And then should we? So yeah, if you want to know more about the bioart and research that has been done recently, I recommend this book that we and it has a yeastogram on the cover, and it has a very broad view on bioart and related research. So you can get the book through all the books, or then, yeah, in the same place there's the free PDF available also. And so I really much hope that I'm able to come to Tokyo in next spring, but it is hard to know what the situation is next year. But I still would like to carry out the research plan for BioClub Tokyo, which has includes selected yeast species found in some sourdough starters and naturally fermented foods, especially which are used in the Japanese cuisine. And yeah, this talk was made possible by the Art Promotion Center Finland and Mattila Creative with the technical assistance and the mental support. So I thank you.
Okay, super. Johanna, thank you so much. Just going to do a quick, before we jump into the Q&A, I just want, oh no, so I'll do that at the end of the Q&A. I've got to remember to do that at the end of the Q&A. Got a little announcement to make. Yeah, well, some questions. First question from Amanda. Why faces, and where did these photos come from? Because you said they were 100 years old. And yeah, sorry, I'll
yeah, they.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have photographed some of the faces, so it's like mixture of living and kind of historical portraits. But I think it's a very practical reason because I need a lot of material for to do the exposures. So I need like I don't know, maybe 60, 70 images of different people, and I like to use like human faces because I think sometimes when they are not like the best outcomes, you look for the face, and it's easier if you know what to look for. And of course I did try other stuff as well, like trees and stuff like that, but then just stuck with the human. And I think the faces are so kind of interesting that you can also just get so many different variation of faces. And I mean, like the historical portraits are also like somehow that some people are looking like some actors today, and then yeah, there's like a lot of different sides on it, like why human.
I see. So, and why raster images?
The raster is because of the it has to be black and white, so or the kind of white is going through, so you have to have it like that you can get like these gray areas, but it has to be very contrasty picture. So this is like very similar to like the fine art, like flexography, or what is it called? Anyway, that the UV light is like when you do a T-shirt or then like fine art, just with the, oh my, I don't know these words in English, but anyway, it's like pressing method or doing like T-shirts and stuff like that. So it's how to, it has to have like the white and the black parts, and then the parts that the light can go through. So that is like, it doesn't really have to be rasterized, the image. It could work. I have been like experimenting on a lot of different things, but you can like write on it, or so you have to have like black mark on transparent whatever sheet of, I use the just the normal printing films.
And
yeah,
I see.
So
So Don wants to know. So I think you kind of answered this during the talk a little bit, but it seems to me that it varies depending on various factors. But in general, how long do the images last before they start getting visitors from other microorganisms?
Yeah, that depends on like a lot of different. Because now I have like these year-old already, or over a year-old plates, and still the image is still visible there. So I think normally when I like did last time I did this 24 images, I think they got moldy for in a week, and I threw them away like very quickly. Sometimes they get it depends on the temperature outside. In the winter time, it's the exposure times can be like really long. Still, after the exposure with the UV, they can like develop for over a week in a warm in just like in a closed box state, like that they are just staying in the warm in the room temperature. So, but then I have been keeping them in fridge temperatures, and that's why that like gives them more time. So of course it's the same as any food item that the fridge temperatures are better. And of course I'm keeping them usually outside in our balcony or like outside temperatures. So, and they are in a closed boxes that are the stuff that grows on them don't easily escape. But of course there is some little creatures living there on the plate. They are not that but then yeah, some of them won't destroy the plates, but it's not like normal to have these very, and I think the species that I was talking about, the Chrysonilla and the Neurospora, which is like just something that can grow on the edges of the Petri dish. So it's not like that I would have them easily when I'm having them in the storage, because the storage is usually just closed boxes. So, and the Chrysonilla likes to grow on the side of the Petri dish, and usually the lid is on. And of course, yeah, the Neurospora, the orange mold, is like this red bread mold, which is kind of common. It's not that common, I think, in Finland, but it is common in bread. So maybe there is some kind of connection with the yeast in bread, or I don't know.
It's interesting. So, Rod, just on this, because Rod asks, and it's on the subject, is some of the examples you showed us had these sort of I think the invasive mold had a sort of concentric ring thing going on and other patterns. Yeah. But he wants to know what causes the concentric rings and some of those extraneous growths on the plates.
Yeah, I'm not like controlling their growth at all, and so I cannot really. I think the round kind of comes from way they are, like way they grow. It's very normal to have round growth when there's nothing other thing is not like on their way, so they like to grow round. I think that's kind of like maybe kind of earth of way of doing things, that they go in a circles. But then if there's some kind of conflict with some other like bacteria. So the mold doesn't grow on the bacteria. So it goes like around the bacteria. So it gets you another shape. And of course, the kind of like linear growth is very not that usual, but I've got that also, like that all the molds were growing just like very in a sharp lines.
Huh.
But of course, that was like combination of mold species, and I don't know that much about the mold species and the other creatures. I haven't identified enough species on these. I should, and I should know like who I'm dealing with more than just that. Yeah, there's Crusonelia, maybe, or yeah, I would like to be more accurate on these species. But
Cool. Okay. We're gonna move along because we got about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure we get through these last three questions. So Melvin wants to know, as he says, the main technique that you showed us today involves fostering or inhibiting growth using light. Has a method involving printing nutrients onto a substrate been tried?
Printing on.
So the idea was that you'd have a way of depositing a pattern of nutrients for things to grow on, rather than inhibiting growth on a. What you're doing. So what you're doing is you've got a substrate with that's edible to the yeast. And then you're using the light to kill or inhibit it from growing where the light hits it. He's wondering if there's a way to, like, say, print or like lay down a pattern on the substrate instead.
Yeah, I think the bacteriography work with Zachary Koffer, he's doing kind of opposite way of the raster image, that the raster is the bacteria that grows. So I think there is ways in doing this, but then I think you should have a different kind of like technical equipment to do that, and maybe laboratory kind of surroundings. Because I think I'm like using this kind of very scientific method, but then I'm doing things that are not like really done in usually done in microbiology, because it's like they never like wash the petri dishes or something like that. So I'm not like very working in a very clean way. So I mean, with this kind of like knowing that it's only one or couple of species there, for sure it would be like really hard. But I don't know about them there, but I'm sure that there is an technical solution for it, that it could be done in opposite way.
Cool. Another question from Rod is, he asks, is it possible to make these edible somehow, or to create them on something edible, or are they already edible?
They are edible. So yeah, I really would like to try the lingonberry shades or because I think it did look very delicious. But I don't know about the yeast taste, but then you can get the yeast from just like health stores to kind of, that's just very kind of healthy.
Yeah, Marmite, yeah.
So it's sugar and then the lingonberry and water. So kind of like very like nice dessert. Very simple, but I think could be nice dessert.
Yeah. No, it sounds like if you wanted to like be a corporate hack and monetize this, that like maybe one direction you can go.
Yeah, one point is that I wouldn't eat them after the 48 hours of exposure time, because I think in 2 days things can get like some other things that are not like so healthy. But of course the agar is very thick, so it doesn't really, the yeast is getting the moles and all the creatures and things on them, but then the agar is not like thriving with the microbial little creatures. So yeah, but anyway, I think it would be nicer to eat it before the exposure.
Right. So one last question from Don is he says he saw at least 3 different wavelengths of UV lamps in the photo that you showed. Why do you need different lamps with different colors, quote unquote?
Yeah, I have tried to build like effective UV lighting system for killing or altering the yeast cells. And I think it doesn't really, or with this kind of like variety of different wavelengths, it's they are not making any sense in my kind of like work, because I cannot really say like, is it working because of the UV light wavelength? So usually there's so many other parameters that can go wrong, or that the picture just doesn't form on it. It is totally like more complex than just the wavelength. So the wavelength has to be under 410. Otherwise, if it's higher, different wavelength, or like blue light, that doesn't work. It doesn't just kill the yeast cells or alter the yeast cells. Nothing happens, and then it doesn't work. And yeah, I have tried so many of these lamps that you can buy from eBay, and it's just frustrating because they are selling UV lights which are not UV lights. So that's kind of like something. It's better to build your own than buy anything from like the cheap shops. I mean.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So pro tip, don't get your UV lights for Yeastograms on eBay. That's how we're going to end. That's where we're going to, that's the pro tip we're going to end on. Johanna, thank you so much. Okay. And we're going to throw to a break now. So 7 minutes. Here we, well, once I get this flipped over, here we go. Okay. I've started the clock and put on the music. It's time for another break. See you in 7 minutes.
Don't stop.
Hey, are you ready? Because you've got just 2 minutes to get back in your seat, catch the last talk of the evening. Get that drink, take that pee. 2 minutes.
Stop.
Hey, it's me again. I just wanted to say, in case you're just dropping in midway, that Nerd Night functions as a fundraiser for the Yokohama Theater Group, or YTG as it's known somewhere. And obviously, with things being shut down for COVID-19, things are a little tight for a nonprofit theater company. So if you want to, and I know a lot of us freelancers are kind of in a tight place because of everything having been shut down for so long, but if you can and you want to and you will, why don't you head over to ytg.jp, hit the support button, and there's a whole bunch of options there. Also a reminder, you can buy some lovely Nerd Night beakers. Those are always available, and we're happy to send them out to you since we're not in a position to sell them at the bar, obviously. All right, enjoy the rest of the show.
Okay, thanks for staying with us. And now on to our third speaker of the night, Kyogo Kawaguchi. Kyogo is a biophysicist working as a Microbial team leader at Riken, and his lab is located in Kobe. He was born in Kawasaki, lived in Sydney, Australia, it says in brackets, I guess to distinguish it from Sydney the person. He lived in Sydney, Australia as a kid, and came back to Tokyo to grow up in the Keio Inokashira Line area. His hobbies are reading and listening to the radio. Because he doesn't like podcasts? Because he's from the 1950s? I don't know, whatever. Kyogo is going to tell us how concepts from geometry and asymmetry play interesting roles in the development and maintenance of our body. All right, Kyogo, start talking.
Hello, nerds and YouTube. My name is Kyogo Kawaguchi, talking to you from Kobe in Japan. So I'm a biophysicist studying multicellular dynamics and cell fate decision. And today I want to talk about what we're recently learning about the behavior of the cells and how they are like collectively migrating and doing their thing. So it's no secret that we are made of cells. And the cells typically have the size of the order of 10 micrometers, and we are like 1.7 1.5 2 meters. So we can scale up from the cell to a human body, and the human body can scale up to the landscape of Japan. So this is a Google Map image. And so I'm zooming into like an island, which is where our lab is, called Port Island. And so you can zoom in further to see, okay, now it's frozen. Okay, it's good. The entrance of our lab. And you can see that there's a car here and like maybe humans. So you can appreciate that on Google Map, you can zoom out, you zoom in from the landscape of Japan into like a human size scale. So only if we can do that for our body. Fortunately, there is that tool called a microscope, and that has been around for quite a while. So what is the news is that now we can use this microscopy technique to do live imaging. So we can actually look at the cells while they are doing their thing in our real body. And sometimes we want to take them out and culture on a dish and do live imaging to see more in detail what they're up to. But today I want to introduce you to like basic concepts of why the dynamics is really interesting and like somewhat important. So one thing is that we have like rapid turnover. So the cells are getting lost. And it's also where we're gaining the cells. And in a sense, we're kind of undergoing this rapid turnover. So I said that we have like 37 trillion cells in our body. And so we're kind of roughly losing and gaining about 0.1% of our cells every day. But we're still kind of standing pretty solid. So it's a pretty non-trivial task. And also I want to show you several movies about how the cells are moving and they can sometimes like collectively make nice patterns. So to jump into some specific tissue, so this is the skin. So this is a tissue that has been studied for a very long time. So using the microscopy, people have figured out what the tissue looks like. And so this is a sketch from the 50s. And the top layer is the shedding layer. The cells are already dead and they've lost their nucleus and they're just waiting to get shut off. And those cells originally come from what is called the basal layer, which is the very bottom. So this is the two-dimensional plane that's kind of like beneath our skin, or kind of barely beneath our skin. And they are actually the origin or the source of all the cells that are coming on top of them. So people have known that the cells are like only provided from this layer. So that's where the cells are dividing, and the cells kind of migrate up, and eventually they get shut off from our surface. But now we can do live imaging, as I said. So we can kind of jump into a mouse skin, and this specific image was taken by a group in Yale Medical School, a Greco lab, and they have a nice microscopy setup with all the labelings of the mouse, and we can appreciate the cell division going on live. So we can take this and we can analyze this. So this is a cell mitosis. This is the blue is the cell nucleus. So when it divides, kind of splits into two, and eventually the cell kind of acquires this cell boundary as well. Okay, so this is just one zoom into a single cell, but you can, in the actual experiment, we can image larger regions. So we can look at the whole two-dimensional plane across like millimeters of scale. So this is one specific example where we took like the modern version of this sketch, this kind of cross-section, which looks like this. Now we're only looking at the cell nucleus, and you can see that this kind of like mashed up and in a pretty high density situation. And in this, if we take the section of the very bottom, the basal layer, then this is what you see. So again, the cells are kind of like crowded, and you might appreciate that there's some like kind of in-betweens, but they're all basically kind of, if you look at the actual cell shape, they're all like densely packed. So as I said, this is live, so you can see a movie, and you can see that there's a lot going on. So the cells are, first of all, dividing, and some cells are actually kind of leaving as their kind of neighbors are dividing, and some of them are leaving. So you can imagine that you can analyze how the cells are interacting with each other and how they are sometimes like affecting other cells' fate. So this is a little bit exhausting, but we have this kind of tracking method. So we associate the positions and the fates of each cell, what they're going to do. So this is the initial kind of configuration. You have the cells, and the colors are just randomly coded for each cell. And when I play a movie, what's going to happen is that now the cells are actually dividing, or getting lost. They're kind of disappearing from this plane and kind of eventually getting shed off. And this color is coming from the original cell. So the original cell, if you remember, had this kind of random colors. And some of them are able to make many offsprings. They have like cell divisions many times, and they end up having like some like region. They kind of take up some area. And there are many colors that are actually lost, which were in the original image. And those are the ones that got basically these cells like differentiated, lost. So in a sense, this is like a survival game. So if you have like a lattice or like houses embedded in this 2D plane, all the cells are trying to kind of like expand their region, but the whole land is somewhat limited. So when they expand, they have to like take other people's land. And this is exactly what is happening. So what we found is that this is really like a, what do you call it, like an encamping game. So you have these kind of areas or houses, and you're trying to kind of invade your neighbor. And what the neighbor invasion here means is that just kind of taking that space and you're kind of like putting your offspring right there. And there's like a great deal of interest and mathematics going on in this kind of simplified model of this kind of encamping game. And all the statistics of this kind of game kind of actually fits nicely with what's actually going on in our skin. So this is where the many body physics, or like the physicist kind of point of view, comes in to understand our tissue. So physicists have been playing this kind of game itself, actually, of like considering different rules of the games they want to play. So this is one famous, really well-studied example of like phase transition. The physicist's way of thinking about phase transition is that, okay, so they're made of a bunch of H2O molecules, and depending on the temperature, the ordering, whether they crystallize or whether they become more free, would change, because there's like a competition between this kind of temperature, which tries to randomize stuff. And there's also this kind of interaction between the molecules, which tries to kind of order things. And because of this competition, if you change the temperature, you would kind of switch phases. More kind of somewhat elaborate way, or like a simplified way of thinking about this phenomena, is to introduce a really simplified model. And this is something that's kind of similar to the game that I showed in the previous slide, but we have like lattice, we have these particles. And now we kind of think of these kind of H2O molecules as just these dots. And the dots have this kind of specific role that they can move around, but they want to kind of attach with the dots that have the same color, and they have some interaction. And if you run the simulation, you would see this kind of liquid-like phase and this kind of gas-like phase. And you would have like certain predictions about this type of model of what would happen between the phase transitions. And that really helped people build the universal features of the phase transitions that goes across, not just for H2Os, but like across many, many other disciplines as well. And there are like other like modern models where you consider things that are actually moving, and where they have like self-propelled motion. So this is like the fish school. Fish obviously are different to molecules because they actually have the ability to move in one direction. So it's not Brownian motion, but they have this kind of unidirectional motion. And so in this case, people have thought of like theoretical models to explain why fish can make these nice structures. And one way of thinking about is that all the fish, they tend to align to each other just by looking at their neighbors. So they try to align to what your nearest neighbors are doing. And sometimes that's enough to actually make this really large scale pattern and kind of swim all in the same direction. Okay, so there's like a really broad kind of perspective, or like way of thinking, or way of applying these kind of games or models to a natural phenomena. So it's not really restricted to water molecules or whatever, but you can apply this kind of concepts from many body physics into like biological models, or sometimes like this a really macroscopic scale as well. So another example that I brought is the neural stem cells, and these are the cells that we culture in our lab. And this is now, unfortunately, not in our real brain, but we can take it out and look under the microscope in the dish. Now the cells are somewhat like similar to the fish school. They tend to kind of align with each other, and they have this kind of nice pattern where they have this kind of horizontal kind of alignment. So now the cells are a little bit hard to see, but these kind of rod-like shaped cells, that they are just single cells. And so here you have like already hundreds. The cells, again, if you stain the nucleus, they look like this. And the cells, the nice thing is that they're moving. So if you run like a live time-lapse imaging microscope, you would see that they're not just like sitting there with this alignment, but they're actually dynamically kind of going back and forth with respect to their alignment pattern. This kind of rod-like shaped cells is pretty common in our body. It's not just the neural progenitors and neural stem cells, but there are many, many other types of cells that do the same type of alignment pattern owing to the shape. It doesn't have to be cells, obviously. If you have these rods and if you kind of put them in a high density situation, you would expect them to align. And this is the example of the noodles in a pot. This is a really important concept in liquid crystal. So these are molecules that are embedded in our units of our displays and our phones. These are actually have very similar shapes. So they have this rod-like shape and they tend to align with each other. And the nice thing about these molecules is that you can tune their orientation or the alignment by electric field. So that's really quick. So that would change the optical property of this kind of unit. So that's how we switch colors in our display really quickly. So this kind of like rod-like interaction is really ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's in our phones, and the cells do the same thing. What we found a couple of years ago is that the cells, because they're dynamic, they do something that is even more bizarre than just usual liquid crystals. So they actually collectively move and kind of aggregate in some points in the space. And some of them actually are kind of running away from some point in the space. So these points, I hope you can see the movie, are actually called the topological defects. And if you have a trained eye or a mathematician, you would associate topological defects right here, like 3 of them at the top and 2 at the bottom. To give you a little bit of a better sense, these points are where the alignments cannot be defined. So the cells are kind of aligned like this nicely at the bottom, horizontally at the top. But now at the center, you can't really say which direction the cells are pointing. This triangle pattern is also very similar. In the middle of the triangle, you can't really tell which direction the cells are aligned to. So these 2 types of topological defects are what you would see typically in this kind of like rod-like shape situation. So the topological defects are everywhere, and you can see them in actually your fingers. Your fingerprints, you have topological defects. And also in your hand, I mean, it's not just your fingers, but all throughout the hand, you can see that there are defects. Again, if you get used to it, it's really easy to identify. And again, in the noodle pot, you see it. And the topological defect is a really, again, a very general concept. So it doesn't really have to be this kind of rod-like shape or this kind of lines. You can define it in the pattern of your hair or this is actually the back of some dog that my colleague took a picture of. So there's these kind of points in the space. Just to go back to the dynamics of the cells were actually specifically looking for this type of topological defect, the +1/2, and that's where the cells were getting sucked into, and they just kind of made these nice aggregates. So from the physics point of view, this is really interesting because geometry was made by the cells themselves. So they made this kind of situation in the first place, but they get kind of entrapped in the end. So this is somewhat like a new phenomenon that physicists are trying to understand right now. And this is like a field called active matter, which is kind of like a mashup of like biophysicists and like biologists, also like more condensed matter physicists, and so forth. Okay, so I'm running out of time, so I'll go quick. So this is, again, culturing the same type of cells, but we're looking at the patterns that they can make in a more macroscopic view. So we're kind of putting the cells in this kind of gel dome and seeing what they do when they kind of spread out from the center. You can see that the cells are kind of making these patterns, I'll show again. And now we have this chirality. So this is some of our more recent findings. So the cells always kind of swirl into the same direction. this is another type of experiment that we did. So this is kind of using something called a stamp. So we're kind of allowing the cells to only migrate in certain areas of the dish. So in this case, you're kind of prohibiting the cells to come into this center circle. So the cells have to kind of go around this circle in some way. And I hope you can see in the movie, maybe it's pretty hard to tell, that the cells are actually swirling unidirectionally in a clockwise manner. So they're always kind of going in the same direction. So this is called chirality, meaning that if you put this in the mirror, you wouldn't get the same image. Okay, so chirality, you might be thinking that our body is not really chiral, meaning that when we look in the mirror, we look pretty much similar to what our pictures look like. But if you look inside our body, we're not symmetric at all, right? So we have this kind of chirality. We have this handedness. So normal people would have this type of organ orientation, but there's like some diseases that actually cause the switching of this disease, the organs, the positions of the organs. People have figured out that different animals have different ways of kind of showing this chirality. Typically, during development, there's like some stage where they kind of break the chiral symmetry and they kind of go into one direction. And unfortunately, it's not really preserved, so it really depends on the species. But what is actually pretty common is that, so in the case of the mouse, there's this really weird thing called the nodal flow, where the cilia is making this chiral flow, which kind of like induces leftward flow to kind of tell the embryo that this side is left. But that's just one example. But in all these experiments, or all these examples, what is common is that they're all kind of dictated by molecules, or like the proteins. So components of the cells are chiral. So the cells are made of this kind of actin filaments, and these are the ones that actually kind of making the cell shape and also helping them to migrate. And so the actin filament actually looks like this. So you can see that it already has this spiral or chirality. And why the actin filaments have this chirality is because our amino acids are chiral. So we only have the L type of amino acids. We don't have the D type. And that's kind of causing this chiral symmetry breaking. So if you have this actin filament, you would expect that the cells would tend to migrate more into this direction than the other. So that would mean that it would be really hard to screw with the chirality of the amino acids. But if we can kind of interfere with the actin filament somehow, even in a really mild perturbation, maybe we can kind of mess with the chirality. So this is what we did. We kind of put in a drug called jasplakinolide, which is actually an actin, some form of inhibitor of actin. And then we found that the chirality can now be switched. So the cells are kind of migrating in the anti-clockwise direction now. In case the movie is not showing at all, this is just like quantification. Without the drug, it's like flowing in this direction. But with the drug, you can make it flow in the opposite direction. So the chirality is somewhat hardwired into our body, our molecules, but ways to perturb it at the level of like the myosins or actins. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of like further information, if you're interested, the skin stuff, most of it is published, and there's this nice culture of preprints recently. So if you go like Google this like number, you can actually look at the almost printed version of this, the papers. So this is about the skin, and this is about the collective cell dynamics and the topology of the stem cells. And this is about the more recent work of the chiral cell behavior. Okay, this is acknowledgements. So the skin part is a collaboration with Greco Lab in Yale Medical School, and neurostem cells collaboration with my old boss, who was in the University of Tokyo and now in Shanghai, and Kageyama sensei is in Kyoto, and Wamichi-san is a grad student of some. And now we have a group in Riken, and we have several postdocs and technical staffs, and we're doing experiments and theory together. Okay, thank you, I'm done.
Okay, right. So I think you must have explained things really well. I don't see a lot of questions. Just
sorry.
sort of a random one, not
Please,
random, but from the beginning of your talk, this might be a little bit outside the scope, but you mentioned 20 billion cells die daily in the body,
Yep.
or replaced daily in the body. How many of those, Don wants to know, how many of those are in the epidermal layer?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the exact answer, but I think the big portion is coming from the gut. The gut has a faster turnover than the skin, and it also has a larger area than our skin. So that's probably, I would guess that more than half of the 20 billion will be coming from the gut.
Okay. Hey, Ed, can you just pop back, unshare your screen now so we can see your face while you're answering the questions?
Sorry.
I can see your little face in the corner, but the audience can't.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Hope, Don, does that answer your question? You answered my question while you were talking. No. Apparently, Don wants me to mention that the Cetus and Versus, the mirrored organs, made an appearance in the terrible movie Ninja Assassin.
Oh, really?
For what it's worth. Apparently, that was a plot thing.
That's cool. I mean, it's important to know where your heart is, right? I mean, if you want to kill someone.
Yeah, exactly. Or, any other organ that you're wanting to stab, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, why... And I'm just seeing, I think this is again from Don. Why would we want to perturb chirality? Chirality or what's the I sound?
It's chirality. Actually.
Chirality, okay. Chirality in the human body. Why would we want to perturb that?
Well, that's an interesting question. So one thing is that we want to understand where this chirality comes from, because it's just interesting. Another somewhat a little bit more far-fetched reason in our case of the experiments is that now the cells are actually a really good experimental ingredient to understand what happens when collective dynamics happen when the entities are moving around. So we're trying to solve the kind of rich phase diagram, or this kind of rich phases that these kind of active components getting mashed up would kind of show us. And in the future, we can kind of make these metamaterials that actually are composed of this kind of moving elements, and then we really want to know their feature. But we're not there yet in terms of manufacturing those robots yet. It's actually much easier to use cells. So I mean, yeah, in that course, we want to know why the cells are doing this thing, it's the other.
So just as a follow-up to that, from Max, are there any potential medical applications for understanding chirality?
Yeah, that's a good question. So some people say, so the interesting thing about the chirality in our body is that our organs, the orientations of our organs is decoupled to the orientation of our brain. So it's known that our brain is also chiral. So we have the right and left. And people don't know why that is. So what that chirality, how that is broken is not really well understood yet. So this is potentially in that direction, kind of going to solve that mystery. But still, I mean, that's really kind of still very hand wavy. But yeah, there's no direct application that I can think of right now. So that's, yeah, a physicist's way of answering.
Right, a physicist's way of answering a medical question. I'm not that kind of doctor.
Exactly.
Damn it, Jim, I'm a physicist, not a... Yeah. Rod actually just mentions in the chat that his mind is blown because he had no idea that molecular chirality could affect something on the scale of, I guess...
Exactly, I mean,
that's... Body. Yeah.
That itself is pretty cool, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, the molecules are tiny. I mean, we can't even see them, but they can make this macromolecules, and they can make cells, and they can make our body in the end. So yeah, I mean, this is a fundamental science. It's fun to think about these things.
Let's see. Don adds as a note, don't be sad, I guess, to the audience as well. Don't be sad that there aren't any applications yet. The same situation will come up in his talk next month. There being no applications, I guess, for whatever he's talking about. Wow. Yeah, I don't see any other questions, and I'll be honest, the bits that I probably would have had questions about were probably above my pay grade as the host. And the parts, I think a lot of the rest of it was quite clear, actually.
Cool.
Sorry, do either Oh, actually, one thing though that I thought of while you were talking is that maybe you could answer the question from the last talk of why those mold spores grow in concentric circles.
Yeah, that was an interesting. So I was also thinking about that. I think it's pretty hard. So I think there's an interaction between the micro whatever species and the nutrients. And so I think typically when you see those kind of concentric circles, some species are eating up the nutrients, which would prohibit some other species to come into that area. And those kind of things typically make these kind of length scales happen. But I'm not sure if that applies to Johanna's case. I wasn't really carefully looking at the experiments themselves.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Actually, it'd be interesting to get you two together to talk about that, because that was a really interesting thing in some of her slides, that there were these patterns that were emerging in some of the mold. I don't see. Oh, whoa. Okay, whoa. Last minute under the wire question. Rod wants to know. He says your examples were 2D flow. Any idea what happens in 3D?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So there are several examples of 3D that are only very recently coming out, both in terms of like artificial experiments and like real tissue. And the short answer is there are really cool examples that are still unpublished, kind of under the hood. Scientists are kind of like secretly having fun with. But I guess, technically it's a bit more challenging. So microscopy is much easier if you do 2D, and that's part of the reason why we're sticking to this 2D system. But there are people who are actually trying to like scan 3D of, for instance, spermatogenesis. Sperms are actually also rods, so they also have this kind of nice 3D liquid crystal-like patterns. And some people say like in our some of our organs we have this kind of liquid crystal-like morphology as well. So yeah, I think that's really actively being studied as well.
Okay, I'm not sure whether you've just answered this because I was distracted looking for questions, because questions are popping up now, of course. Rod follows up with that with any ideas for imaging the movement in 3D.
Yes, there are ideas. So I think usually the challenge is that you want to go fast enough. So you have to scan in 3D. So basically, even in 3D microscopy, people are doing the same thing. They're doing 2D and they're just making Z-stacks. And if you're making Z-stacks, obviously you take more time. And you want to get fast enough so that you can scan like you don't want to like lose out the information of the interesting dynamics. And this thing called the light sheet microscopy is really kind of killing that in that direction. So there's like really nice images coming out recently.
Cool. Okay. Wow. Now, so Max wants to know again, and I don't understand this question. So hopefully you can figure it out. Do you see more EZ trans cis pattern? Does that make any sense to you? That... Like he's like, yeah. Are those ors? All right, they're about 30 seconds behind us, so we'll give Max 30 seconds to clarify that question. EZ or EZ, I guess, if you're American. EZ trans cis pattern. I'm not sure what that means. I don't know what. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know what that means.
That's okay. We'll give Max a second to.
Maybe some like math term that I'm not familiar with.
It could be. Yeah, that sometimes happens. That sometimes happens in Nerd Night questions.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I'll be happy to answer a question from email or like Twitter or whatever.
Yeah. Let's give Max like another 10 seconds, and then we'll move on because because I think that's the last question. Oh. The note in someone summarizing the questions for me on that one is also whatever that means. Max, you may be the only one who knows what that question means. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna just. I can't hit the button to see if the stream is caught up with us because. Yeah, to see if the stream is caught up with us because that'll end up echoing through here. We do need something like the Jeopardy music playing. which would be appropriate tonight, given the fact that Alex Trebek has recently departed. Dun, dun,
Oh, yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Well, I think we're just gonna end the. Sorry to end you on a question that we weren't able to understand. It would have been nice to.
I'm
go
so
out on
sorry if that's something that I just lack knowledge.
That's all right, Max. If you want to follow up on that, we've got you can. If you can't find Kyogo's contact info, I think it's on the website for tonight. I think everyone has their Twitter handle on there. If you can't find that, enantiomer. Does that help? Disasteromer. Cis trans.
I think the cis trans is referring to the molecule, right? So this is like two configurations like this, I think.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah, Max is saying, which pattern do you see the most?
So I'm not sure. So that is about specific types of molecules, and I'm not sure. So this is the cells are made of proteins, and proteins are made of amino acid chains. And in this case, I don't think there's any cis trans. I think if you have the amino acids themselves have the chirality, and if you have this kind of bunch of molecules with chirality into a chain that kind of somewhat determines the chirality of the molecule, I don't think there's any cis trans idea coming into that picture. Not that I can think of.
Max says it's an organic chemistry term.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand. I don't think. Yes, this is a little bit more about biochemistry, so it's not. We're not really looking deeply into the molecule itself, and even if we did, we would only see proteins, and proteins are already fixed type of configuration. So I don't think the cis trans will apply. We just call them the L type amino acids. If that means.
Okay. All right. Let me go over to my script here. Kyogo, thank you so much. And
thank you.
A big thank you to our other two speakers, Karamoon and Johanna. Johanna. I'm getting sleepy. I'm saying J's instead of Yiz. Let's see if I can bring them. Let's bring everybody over here so we can all say goodbye. So yeah, I guess people watching the stream, show your appreciation with, like, I don't know, applause emoji or whatever. Thanks so much, speaking people. Thank you, Karamoon. Thank you, Johanna. Thank you, Kyogo. Very, very fun talks tonight. And yeah, I'm really happy you could all join us for another online edition of Nerd Night. So I'm gonna go. Thank you. So give everyone. I'll bring you back on like at the very end to give one more wave goodbye, but you can give them a wave now. I'm just gonna go into my slides for a sec. Boop, boop. Okay. And I'll just. Oh, hold on, and I'll just mute you guys for a tick too. Okay. Let me just go into my script here. Boop, boop, boop. Oops, I left it over there. Here we go. Whoop. Now it's on my screen. All right. Thank you also, not just to our speakers, but to Don and Ian and Bruce and Coco and Joan and Selena and Melvin and Rio. I am getting pretty sick of not seeing you guys in person. Let's hope that Pfizer isn't bullshitting us. Huge thank you to my co-boss Amanda for being the spinach to Nerd Night Tokyo's Popeye. And finally, a big thank you to all of you people watching for joining us online. Please remember that we'll be back in December on December 4th with a new slate of 3 smart speakers. Follow us on social media. Just search Nerd Night Tokyo wherever you social media. Or even better, join our mailing list. We send you a link in our reminder email, and there's a link in the YouTube description as well. And we'll announce that date as soon as we have it. I'm just going to repeat something that I said earlier during just after Johanna's talk. Do you want to be a speaker at Nerd Night? We are always on the lookout for people who have expert knowledge and are willing to share with our curious crowd. If this sounds like you, please contact us at tokyo@nerdnight.com. The address on the screen. I put it on the screen this time. Look at that. Look at that. I'm going to leave that up there for a couple more seconds, but it's just tokyo@nerdnight.com, N-I-T-E. All right, moving along. Just a reminder to check out that podcast I mentioned earlier. Go and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Search either Miss Charlotte or Wayward Readers in the podcast app of your choice. And in case you joined us super late, Just a reminder that Nerd Night Tokyo is a fundraiser for the Yokohama Theater Group. If you enjoyed yourself tonight and you are able to, please head over to ytg.jp and support us. That is also where you will find our wonderful beakers. You're welcome. And let me just bring the speakers back up and see if I can manage that transition. Oh, look at that. It actually worked. Yeah. So from Yokohama, Japan, for Nerd Night Tokyo, this is Andrew Wilner here with Karamoon, Johanna Rotko, and Kyogo Kawaguchi, bidding you good night. And we'll see you next time. I mean, they won't be here. I'll be here, though. I'll see you next time. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for people watching. Yay! And